And I know as a pastor, you're concerned about people being in the Word throughout the week. Are you also concerned about the kind of music that we're listening to? Does music have the power to shape us the other 6 days of the week too? And I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I want to hear how you say it.
Well, sometimes when I wake up on Monday morning and I am just exhausted from the previous day.
I have no idea why you would be exhausted.
And I'm trying to get going for the day. It can be sometimes emotionally challenging for me as well. And more often than not, on Monday mornings, I'm turning on choral music, of sacred music that is very not only soothing in its music and very lofty, but the texts are there to remind me of the very things I preached the previous day. And so it is a way that music is a very powerful way in just being able to memorize as well, and to be able to hide that word in our heart. When we sing something, in fact, there are some texts that I have to go back and catch the tune in order to be able to regurgitate what the text is.
I've been there.
And when I'm trying to come up with something, I get to the tune, and then and so as far as music goes, yeah, it has a very powerful effect upon us, and I even use that in order to try to help my own emotions and my mental state when I'm very distressed or distracted. And I find that even music, particularly the Psalms, are prayers. And the more I can spend time in prayer with God, whether it be as I'm going throughout my day or on my knees before God, that is something that is a means of grace to me. So yeah, music is a very powerful aspect to our sanctification. And that's why I think Paul, not only in Ephesians but in Colossians, is commending them to this exercise and to this great joy, even as we sing to each other and we sing with melody in our hearts unto the Lord. There is this challenge, this testimonial, this praise, and all of this comes together in God's worldview to sanctify us, Monday through Saturday, as well as on the Lord's Day.
So when you mentioned getting up in the morning on Monday mornings and turning on choral music, most people would associate that with something that's done on a Sunday. And you mentioned something that was interesting to me, which was connecting the enjoyment of the word and of music both together in context with each other. You connected that to prayer. And I thought that was very interesting because the directive is for believers to pray without ceasing, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's true that we're supposed to live a life of prayer without ceasing, what does that mean in terms of the division that some people make between sacred and secular music? And should we be only listening to what we would call sacred music all throughout the week?
No, and that's not my habit either. Again, when I'm working and I'm doing something that I need to help break up just the monotony of an overly repetitious activity in the shop or whatever it is, I tend to use other kinds of music that will have a little bit more of an upbeat and a particular tempo that keeps me energized. So I use different types of music depending on what the situation is. I also encourage listening to different genres. And the reason I do so is because I do believe that sacred music is its own genre. I do believe there is a difference that we should make between the holy and the common and make those distinguished. And yet, not just taking every genre of music and baptizing it with different text and to be able to make that fitting now for the liturgy on the Lord's Day. So I think as the church acknowledges that there are different music for different settings and say that that's appropriate to do, it makes the sacred music all the more distinguished in its rightful place. So when I'm at the ball game, and we want to say, take me out to the ball game, we all sing in that seventh inning stretch, it's very appropriate and fun, and it's fitting for the occasion. So yes, I do believe God has given us a gift that we can use for all walks of life and all different aspects of it, and it's especially heightened in the time when we're before His presence on the Lord's Day.
So what we've established is that music does have an impact on us that's deep and it's broad. And what I heard and what you just said was that and I would agree with this. I was blogging about this recently, that we have a lot of choice, not just in the music that we purchase, whatever we download on iTunes, but we have an incredible amount of choice in how we consume the music that we have. And with that comes responsibility. That anything that I listen to, I'm listening to by choice. I'm taking this into myself like we take food into ourselves. Except, unlike food, and Jesus is very specific about this, isn't he? That what we eat doesn't hardly matter as much as what comes out of us. Mm-hmm. And if what I'm taking in is not in keeping with what the Lord wants me to be meditating on, I feel like that's a failing on my part. Is there a moral component to what we choose, and do you think we, as Christians, don't take enough responsibility for what we listen to and how, perhaps, we listen to it?
Yes, indeed. And there's several different aspects to that particular answer that comes to mind as you're mentioning that. When the psalm, when Paul says, teaching one another through songs, that word teaching is the same word doctrine. And we are being indoctrinated deliberately and focused with and through this medium of music. Well, that can also go on with any kind of teaching and doctrine. In fact, Francis Schaeffer was the one who said, as we judge the arts and judge things like music, the higher the degree of beauty and attractiveness in the medium, the more careful we need to be in its message. If it is a very bad message, but it's just given a very poor medium, that's not near as dangerous as a bad message in a very high-structured, very beautiful and artistic medium, which happens to be much more attractive, and we tend to consume that, even whatever the message would be. So the message and medium do go hand in hand, and we have to be very discerning, and we cannot be passive. When we're passive, we become passive recipients of indoctrination, sometimes unwittingly. And we have these messages that continue to go on in our mind, whether it be text or whether it even be some form of the medium itself, that then at some point is related to a broader culture or something that is not conducive for our Christian walk with Christ. So I think these are very, as music is powerful, I think these are also very significant things that we need to consider, because it can be very powerfully in a good way or very powerful in a bad way. And we have to be very proactive and deliberate in what we listen to.